I thought, nobody here knows that they just passed a big tax hike, except for me, because I happen to be there. And that's the thing with information is power, but who has the information first is more powerful in a sense, because now you have something that people want. Now, with the advancement of AI, we thought, is there something that's good at summarizing what people are saying? Well, obviously, computers can do that for us. And so it's just an obvious solution to hook the government up to a system where it will automatically transcribe everything they say and summarize it for us.
This is Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio.
Hi, and welcome to Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio, the show that takes you around the globe to talk with the interesting, courageous leaders throughout the worldwide freedom movement. We have a conversation today with one of those extraordinary leaders, and that's Joe Kent, the Executive Vice President of the Grassroot Institute in Hawaii. And Joe and I are sitting down at the Radical Innovation Summit in Mexico City. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Joe, you're here. You participated as part of the Brain Trust yesterday. I want to talk to you a little bit about that later on. But you're really here presenting and talking about the work that you all have done at Grassroot Institute, specifically with open hearings. And so talk to us a little bit about Grassroot and what you all are working on.
Sure. So the Grassroot Institute is a nonprofit think tank that focuses on individual liberty, economic freedom, and limited accountable government. That's hard to do in Hawaii, by the way. We have big government thinkers. Every single problem has a big government solution over there. And we are the light post out there for liberty and trying to find free market solutions. We have been winning a lot in the past 4 years, I'd say, getting dozens of wins every year. And so we're trying to figure out how to do our job better. And one of those things is paying attention to the government, because nobody wants to pay attention to the government. That's our job, really. We watch the government so they don't have to. But that takes a lot of time to do that. And so we actually have created some tools to help us do that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that tool in particular, because I know it's gotten quite a bit of attention here at the Radical Innovation Summit, and something that I think many of our peers throughout the worldwide freedom movement could learn from and maybe adopt in their state.
Yeah, well, I thought of it when I was sitting in an 8-hour government hearing, falling to sleep. I was in a government hearing once that went till 1 a.m. in the morning, and this was a tax hike. And that's when they passed the tax hike, by the way, when no one was there. But I was there and I was listening, and it was so funny because the next day I went to a coffee shop and I thought, nobody here knows that they just passed a big tax hike, except for me, because I happen to be there. And that's the thing with information is power, but who has the information first is more powerful in a sense, because now you have something that people want. And so that's why we attend these government hearings, but it was taking too long. I mean, I have to sit forever in these things. Now, with the advancement of AI, we thought, is there something that's good at summarizing what people are saying? Well, obviously, computers can do that for us. And so it's just an obvious solution to hook the government up to a system where it will automatically transcribe everything they say and summarize it for us. So you've got this big haystack, and now we have a needle detector, so to speak.
Okay, so I'm sure our audience listening to this says, well, yeah, of course Joe would figure that out. He's got a background in big tech, right? Or he's written software and understands code, right? So
no, I am a humble music teacher. That's my background. I taught in the public school system for 8 years, kindergarten through 12th grade. And so actually I'm more of an aesthetics type of a person. So we just hired a team. You can hire programmers, sure, it turns out, and tell them what to do. And so we told them to create this system for us. Now it exists as a durable tool that we can use forever. And that helps us stay ahead of the information. I mean, a lot of times we're getting information that journalists aren't even getting. And we can give the information to the journalists who might help us put our perspective in the story, for example. So it's just been a really useful tool in a lot of ways.
Yeah, talk about some of those uses and applications, and I'm wanting you to dive into this because I wonder if some of our peers we even heard of in the some of the project presenters and leaders yesterday here at the summit that were kind of nibbling around the edges of what you're already into. So talk about some of that.
Yeah, so there's this policy that they have on Maui that concerns toilets. And they basically restrict the amount of toilets in a home, right, in an accessory dwelling unit. They count how many toilets you have, and you can only have so many. But we were advocating for them to change the law to count how many people are in the house, not how many toilets instead. And so we caught someone with our open hearings platform saying, yeah, they should count the butts, not the toilet seats, right? And so, so they actually changed the law to do that. And we caught it. We made a little meme video out of it, and it went viral and so on. But that's the kind of stuff that you can pick up is what's on the hot mic when lawmakers don't really know what they're saying, or they forget, right? Another is food trucks. On Maui, they had this policy that in effect banned food trucks from operating. And the way we found out is through our system. It automatically informed us and alerted us to this. And so we were able to act very quickly. And in fact, we could use AI to summarize all of the arguments in favor of banning, and then we could counteract those very quickly. So speed is important in policy work.
Absolutely. Are you all working with any partners right now to help them adapt, or would you be available if a partner reached out and said, hey, how do I do this? And so I'm from Oklahoma, right, in my state of Oklahoma.
There's a lot of people in the free market networks who are reaching out to us about this, and they want to do it. We haven't yet rolled it out anywhere. We'd be happy to. It's just that we've created this for ourselves, and if anybody wants to use it, we would be happy to either copy and paste it for them or figure out how to make it work. So sky's the limit, and we're totally open to that. Yes. If you'd like to contact us, go to openhearings.com, by the way.
Openhearings.com. And folks, if you'd like to learn more about what Joe and his colleagues at Grassroot Institute are doing, or any of their other peers in the worldwide freedom movement, go to atlasnetwork.org. And while you're there, sign up for the Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner this November in New York City, where Joe and his team are a finalist for the Templeton Freedom Award. So, Joe, I'd like to talk to you about that now. And you're a finalist for the work that you all did helping the community that you taught in take some bold actions to rebuild after some fire. So lay the groundwork for us here. What happened in Lahaina, and what steps did you take?
Well, when we saw the fires burning in Lahaina, of course, they didn't know how many people were killed at that time. But I mean, I knew. I've lived there many years. I've taught at the school there, in King Kamehameha III Elementary School, right there on the ocean. Beautiful, multi-million-dollar view, but it's a public school. It's amazing. Right next to the big banyan tree. If anyone's ever been to Lahaina, everyone knows that. And the fire was engulfing that banyan tree. And I said, if the fire got that far, imagine how many people have died there. And so we reached out to all of our friends and supporters and relatives there in Lahaina, and upcountry Maui as well got hit. And first thing is take care of the people, figure out, are you okay, and everything. Unfortunately, we do know some people who did pass away in that fire, and that's unfortunate. One of our friends, his name is Joe Pluta. He told us the story about how he leaped from his second story window to escape the flames within just minutes of his life, and escape that way. Other people had randomly turned down the wrong street, the right street, and escaped miraculously. It's all kinds of stories like this, of course. But after that, the community now said, okay, what next? And we got to work. And the first thing we did is try to tally what is in the way of rebuilding Lahaina. And unfortunately, Hawaii, Maui, is the most regulated state in the nation when it comes to building. Really? There's been many studies about this, and we have studies on our website and so on, and it shows that even if your home was destroyed in a fire and so on, you have to jump through years, sometimes a decade of regulations just to rebuild. And so we said there's no way that the town is going to be rebuilt under all of these regulations. And so we started writing about this. We were the only group actually in Hawaii that was writing and tallying all of these things, because there was a lot of other things to focus on. But we kept our eye on the ball and approached lawmakers with what our findings were and tried to educate people. We wrote op-eds. Turns out this problem happened before on Kauai. Kauai in the 90s was hit by Hurricane Iniki. A lot of the island was wiped out. That's 2,000 homes destroyed, and they rebuilt in 1 year, because what they did is they lifted the rules and they said, okay, you can rebuild, right? They eased up on the regulations. Well, in Lahaina, there were 2,000 structures that were destroyed as well. And so did we learn from Kauai or not? And we tried to tell this story again and again. Now, lawmakers thankfully listened to what we were saying and did lighten some of the regulations. Not as much as we would have wanted, but they lifted it enough to where I think around 200 homes have been rebuilt so far. It's been like 2 years since the fires, though. Yes, it's going faster than it would have gone, but it's still too slow. So we went to the state legislature and we're talking a lot more about the different reforms that were needed, and some more reforms were passed. So it's little by little bites at the apple. And thankfully, now I think there's 400 homes that have their permits to build. So we're making progress.
I think you're underselling a little bit of the hard work you all are doing. I heard a stat one time that Grassroot was testifying like 60 plus times to try to get lawmakers' attention. Is there a point where you all were going through the process that you sat down with the team and you're like, they're finally listening? We've hit this turning point. We're starting to have success.
Oh, yes. When we saw some of the governor's staff at our events who were taking our reports home with them and back to the office with them, we knew, okay, something's going on here. The governor, by the way, had a lot to do with lifting the regulations as well, but he can only lift them in a temporary way, an executive order or proclamation and so on. And he did a lot of that, but at the same time, we want some permanent reforms too. What if this happens again? And is this really applicable in all areas and so on? So, liberty should be liberty across the board, not just when it's convenient.
I'm sure the opposition that you face is, man, deregulation is going to allow for cutting corners in development. But in reality, lifting red tape is probably the most compassionate thing to do in trying to redevelop, right? Am I right on that?
Well, yes. When we were trying to assess how long it would take people to rebuild, I said a decade. It was more than a decade. There were some government bodies that thousands of homes had to get through, and these government bodies hadn't met in 6 months. And even when they do meet, they might hear one case or two cases and so on. We're talking about thousands of these cases. And so if you don't lift the regulation, there's no way that these people can rebuild. Another one was the permitting department. Hawaii, Maui has the slowest permitting departments in the nation. Really? It takes oftentimes more than a year or 2 years just to get through. You go to the mainland or some other state, I've seen it, people get their permits in a day, right? And how do they do that? Well, in some jurisdictions, on the mainland, they hire a private company. So if there's a backlog, let's hire a private company. They clear out the backlog and, problem solved. But in Hawaii, there's a law that says it's illegal to hire a private company to do a job that a government worker typically does. I don't know if there's any state that has a law like this. It's a crazy law, yes. And so we wrote about this as well. We wrote a whole report about this, and we've talked about it a lot. And there is a stipulation in the law where lawmakers are allowed to create little carve-outs. And so they created a little carve-out for this Lahaina situation to allow for the first private permitting office on Maui that had ever existed. It popped up. I think they called a firm, what was it, CH2M Hill or some other Four Leaf, excuse me. And they were very quick. They picked up the phone on the weekends, I'm told. I talked to someone named Ariel Ahi, who was the first person to rebuild in Lahaina. And she said it was amazing. You could call them, after hours, and they would pick up the phone. It's amazing. Yeah. So yes, regulation has a huge impact, deregulation, on people's actual lives.
Where do you think this goes from here? Is this isolated to response after a disaster, or is this, hey, they're starting to listen and understand, and so we think that deregulation can start to help development that's not disaster related, but just for economic development and activity?
Well, yes, I think there's a broad recognition across policymakers in Hawaii. I think it's because of our squawking that there's too much regulation in the housing space. If you look at all of the land in Hawaii, 95% of it is open space and zoned for conservation and open space. You can't build homes there or a neighborhood there like you can in the 5% land that is zoned for affordable housing and neighborhood type of housing. And so if we could just increase that 5% to 6%, you wouldn't have to build onto the aquifers. You could keep nature as is, but you would have a 20% increase in the supply of housing, and that would help bring down the cost of living. And so, the Hawaii's cost of living is so high that we've got, I think, the third highest outflow rate of our population. People are leaving the state, and there are more Hawaiians now that live on the mainland than do in Hawaii. They actually have a joke about it. Most of them moved to Nevada, which they call the ninth island. Yes.
The ninth island, Nevada.
That's right.
That's good. Besides just disasters, housing issue, or whatever, set the table for us, right? What does the liberty movement look like in Hawaii? What challenges exist, but then what opportunities are you realizing?
Well, of course, Hawaii is a big government state. We are a one-party state as well. And of course, you just throw up your hands and say, okay, let's just all give up and go under a blanket and sob, right? But what we do at the Grassroot Institute is use e hanaka ko, which is the Hawaiian phrase for let's work together. And we think it's really important to work together with anyone in any political stripe. We want to get good information in the hands of any lawmaker. And so the funny thing, though, about Hawaii, about a one-party state, is that it's so one party that you start to go colorblind after a while, and it starts to become a little more comfortable to talk to strange bedfellows. Okay. And so we've actually found a lot of inroads there. There are a lot of Democrats in Hawaii who care about lowering taxation, lowering the cost of living, allowing for the building of more homes so that people can find a place to live, allowing for more deregulation to allow for jobs and so on. So there's a strong argument amongst, liberals in Hawaii, Democrats in Hawaii. Of course, most of them are really just independents with a stripe on their banner. And you can talk to people, it turns out, even if there are some things with which you might disagree.
So I'm curious, what you mentioned before being a music teacher and teaching the public school system, but you've been at Grassroot for 11 years now. What was that transition or that step like? Why did you go from teaching the public school system to then working at a free market think tank?
Well, I think it's really the same, believe it or not, teaching kindergartners is really similar to teaching adults sometimes, and especially adult politicians.
Yeah, right.
And so it's a strong policy idea can only win if you can explain it in a way that a kindergartner can understand. And that's what we try to do at Grassroot, break down the complex ideas into a meme or a viral video. And this is another area that we like to go viral on social media. We tend to hit millions of views, often with our videos. And so much so that often when I walk down the street in Hawaii, people recognize, hey, you're that Grassroot guy.
No way, really?
They always recognize me. It's kind of funny. And funny thing is, many government people who work in the government, love our videos as well. So it's done in a funny way, but we never make fun of people. We only make fun of policies.
Do you find that your response and the impact that you've been able to have with Lahaina and that rebuilding effort has opened doors and had people open to your conversation about other areas of reform?
Oh, yes. There's a lot of people in Hawaii who are in positions of power who want to be able to say what we're saying, but can't politically.
Sure.
And so it's interesting, the winks and the nods and, the thumbs up that we get off stage, because actually a lot of the politicians there love what we're saying and wish that we could implement it. I think we're just a few steps away from that, actually. Over the past few years, we've had dozens of wins every single year. And that's partly because of our relationships, but partly also because of this broad coalition of people who, through our Instagram memes and our email and so on, we're building a huge crowd of people who are echoing what we're saying. So some politicians are really interested in what else we have to say. What do you want to say about agriculture or energy or shipping regulations and so on? And a lot of these things are very similar. Agriculture zoning and housing zoning, it turns out, are very similar. Building a power plant and building a house are very similar. They both have to go through the permitting department and so on. So there's a lot of room to branch out.
Talk to me about the 2025 Templeton Freedom Award, right? You find out that you're nominated, find out that you're a finalist. What was that moment like for you? What does it mean for the team?
Well, we couldn't believe it. We were dancing on the ceiling when we found out, absolutely. And of course, our thoughts went back to the people who we're trying to help. Atlas Network, of course, helped support our efforts towards this, so they deserve a huge credit and thank you to them. But we also are trying to package the award. Yes, you can celebrate Grassroot Institute, but celebrate, the wins, the people, the victims who are now heroes because of the changes in policy. And so what we did is we reached out to all the people who are affected, as many as we could find, and tried to interview them, find their story, write it down. And that was a really interesting experience because, we spend a lot of time in the ivory tower. It's nice to come down on the ground level sometimes. So, yeah.
You mentioned the involvement with Atlas Network. Talk to me about that partnership. What has that been like? What has that meant to Grassroot Institute?
Well, what it's been like is Atlas Network pushes really hard, not on the inputs, but on the outcomes, right? So you are trying to make a white paper or you're trying to do a policy thing. How is that really going to affect things? How is that actually going to change? And it's had us think really hard of ourselves. What's our theory of the structure of social change? How do we actually go about changing the world or our small slice of the world? And so, those kind of conversations have been really useful for us.
Atlas Network has partnered with Grassroot from a granting relationship. So obviously there are donors and contributors that are helping the worldwide freedom movement by partnering with Atlas Network. So whether it be here at the Radical Innovation Summit or maybe at Liberty Forum coming up in November in New York, you bump into one of those supporters. What are you saying to them? What's your message to them?
My message is you have no idea the impact that you're having in our little state in Hawaii but actually not just Hawaii. We also got awards at the State Policy Network this year. And so a lot of other think tanks are looking at our little rinky-dink plucky think tank that could and saying, what are they doing different that's working, and how do we implement that? So the idea of Ehana Kako, let's work together, the strategic thinking behind the Overton window, our virality and funny memes and things, and also open hearings, this tool that I mentioned, which uses AI to watch the government. We have so many think tanks who are reaching out and wanting to use it in their areas. So the investments made in the Grassroot Institute actually have a wide impact, not just across the nation, but across the world. I'm getting inquiries now from all over the world to use some of our mechanisms.
What would it mean to win the 2025 Templeton Freedom Award?
Well, it would mean that it's possible to win in adversity. So many people have told us, why do you guys even try in Hawaii? There's no way you can win. But there is a way, I think, if you pick yourself up your bootstraps and make good relationships and think really strategically, you can win. And what that means, it's going to invest more in a think tank that's doing the right things, I think, and hopefully leading the way. We want to be one of the best think tanks at winning in our type of estates.
You talk about the future and kind of signal this momentum, but at the same time, we're talking about a one-party control, blue state. Are there more wins coming for Grassroot Institute? Where is Hawaii 3 to 5 years from now?
Well, that's exactly what we're asking ourselves. Where do we want to go 3 to 5 years from now? And the first place we look is the Overton window. This is the window of political possibilities. And we do strong analysis of what's actually inside or outside the window. Now, just on the margins of the window are some serious reforms that we could talk about when it comes to land use issues. There's one organization, one entity in Hawaii that has stopped businesses, houses from being built, schools from being built, hospitals and so on, and it's the State Land Use Commission. And if you ask any politician, again, behind the scenes with a wink and a nod, they all recognize that this thing is an illegitimate structure. It's just, and not only that, it's duplicative at the county level. So you go 5 years through the State Land Use Commission, you have to do another 5 years at the county level. It makes no sense. And so we think it is in the Overton window to seriously disrupt this structure that doesn't make sense. And that would really change the nature of the state, I think.
What gives you hope, Joe?
Well, the staff that we've picked to win and run our show is just phenomenal. I mean, I just can't think enough about how awesome they are. We've got, I think, the best policy researchers, the best lobbyists, the best, even finance and ops people in the state, I think. And that gives me a lot of hope, that not only that they're highly skilled, but that they're committed to the mission and they really want change. They want to see Hawaii change for the better. And so, it's one thing to just do the work, but it's another thing to really believe in it. And I think that's what we have at Grassroot.
Joe, I've got to ask you, there's something so fascinating about your story, right? Here you have a teacher focused on music, a musician himself, that's teaching in a public school that then gets into public policy work, and his community and his school suffer in one of the largest disasters that his state has gone through. And he jumps back in to help and finds a way and kind of sticks through with his team to get the reforms and attention, to find help that all of a sudden gets national attention across the country and gets recognition, and now international attention, where potentially winning the largest award in the worldwide freedom movement, that's an annual celebration in New York City. Do you recognize, or do you sense sometimes just the power of this story and what's been possible?
Well, our founder, Dick Rowland, often talked about the forgotten man and the power of the forgotten man in the back who's often ignored but would stand up and basically tell the emperor he's not wearing any clothes.
Sure.
And that's what we do at Grassroot. It's part of our mission, but it's also part of my personal mission.
Okay.
I think, no one goes into teaching for the money, but no one goes into think tank work for the money. I'm sure I could make a lot of money elsewhere. But whenever push comes to shove on these types of things, I always put the mission first. So, it really means a lot that we're up for this prestigious award. But whether we get it or not, we're going to continue showing up every day as the forgotten man and women fighting for liberty.
And folks, you can join Joe and I this year in New York in November at the Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner, where the 2025 Templeton Freedom Award will be recognized and awarded to one of this year's nominees. Joe, if one of your peer organizations is listening right now and they hear your story and they hear about the work that Grassroot is doing, what advice do you have for them? What do you want to leave them with?
You need to focus on outcomes that you want, but you also have to focus on the process to get there. At Grassroot, we took a really close look at our process, our management systems, our efficiency at doing little things, innovation. We set aside 10% of our time just to play and innovate with new ideas, do things no one else has been doing. And I think if our think tank movement, if think tanks like ours continue to work at bettering themselves, innovating, creating new ways of doing things, like here at the Radical Innovation Summit, then we're going to, over the long term, be so far ahead of our competition. And that's how we're going to win, is through building better, faster, cheaper, sneakier mousetraps. So that's really what this policy game is about, is who can build the better mousetrap, who can influence and educate in a quicker and more efficient way.
But if one of them is hearing this story and they're saying like, yeah, okay, I get helping after the fires and, going and testifying and kind of getting in front of our legislative leadership, we do that, right? I understand trying to publish op-eds and put out memes. But the technology piece, like the software thing, like that's we don't even know how to start on that. Or we've got an idea for this project, but we don't know where to start. It's outside of our realm. You took that step. So what is your advice for them on how the team should move forward?
I think my prediction is over the next 5 years, AI and technology is going to be such a huge, unignorable factor in the think tank networks that any think tank that's not looking really closely about how they can use it to advance what they're doing is going to be left in the dust. The problem is that it takes a lot of risk to work with a programmer to build something that has never been built before, right? And so any think tank that tries, they're much more likely to fail, of course, but there's going to be a few times that they win and succeed. And so my advice is to invest in a way that allows for some failure, but of course you're always trying to succeed. Also invest in a way that uses partnerships. What has other people been doing? And anyone that wants to look at what we've been doing, I'm happy to share all of our failures. Now, that's another thing that's really important that gets lost in the think tank networks. We tout our wins, but I think the failures are more important for us to learn about. And those are too embarrassing to talk about. Not embarrassing for me, I'll tell anyone. Sure. But of course, we want to learn from the mistakes of others. And so I think there needs to be more sharing about failures and misadventures to help each other.
Yeah, there's an important kind of mental model for leaders that is not being afraid of failure, but just falling forward fast, right? Pick yourself back up. What did you learn from? But keep going forward. And so I appreciate you making that statement and comment. All right, so I'm sure everyone's listening and they're hearing like, wait a minute, Joe, Hawaii, like, yeah, he's got these, but it's Hawaii, man. So we talked about you being a musician. So I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Earlier, before we started, you and I talked about the ukulele, xylophone, marimba, everything. But if you had to just one instrument, what's that instrument? What's Joe going with?
Oh, ukulele all the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we say ukulele in Hawaii, not ukulele.
Okay. Ukulele.
Ukulele. You got it. Yeah.
All right.
Ukulele. Actually, ukus is, lice in your head.
Sure.
It's the little uku and it jumps, right? And when you play the ukulele, you can kind of hear it sounds like a little jumping lice. So
Really?
ukulele. Yes. Yes.
That's fascinating. Okay. So when you're not playing the ukulele, right, or when you're not at Grassroot and all the work that you and the team do with the little time that you have left, right? What's a hobby? What are you doing?
Board games all the way.
Really?
I'm a Euro gamer. So,
Okay.
Settlers of Catan and
No way.
Power Funkenschlag and all these, German games that people can't pronounce, resource building and management. Sounds like I'm running a nonprofit. So, yeah, I'm all
Okay.
about that. I'm trying to make my 5-year-old into a board gamer as well right now.
Well, this is one of the questions that I love asking a guest on the pod all the time. And that's, imagine that you and I are not in Mexico City, right? We're not at the Radical Innovation Summit. Instead, we're at Grassroot Institute's office, right? And we finish here, and then we're going to go eat after this. Where are we going? And more importantly, what are we eating?
Ginza. That's my favorite restaurant.
Okay.
Yes. Ginza is the sushi restaurant there in Kaka'ako. And they survived through the pandemic. Everything was locked down and everything. But I think they survived with a wink and a smile because everyone just loved going there. The owner, he knows everyone's name that comes. If you go in a second time, he'll ask, about your life story. It's just amazing. And this one little restaurant, yes, the food, by the way, is phenomenal, but it's just so neat to talk to the staff as well. So yeah, greatest sushi on the island, I think.
Okay.
Jen's Paradise is what you should order, by the way. It's
Jen's
Paradise. It's a sushi roll. Yeah.
Ginza. Yes. And go to Ginza, order Jen's Paradise. All right. Well, I will remember that. Food speaks to me, so I will remember that. Last question here. When everyone thinks of Hawaii, they're thinking of, lush beaches. They're thinking of just it's beautiful, volcanoes, the sights to see and everything else. What is something everyone maybe doesn't realize or understand about Hawaii that when they visit, when they're there, they should make a point? Is there some place to go, or is there something cultural to be part of that you should know when you go to Hawaii?
Well, everyone asks which island to go to, and I always say Big Island. It's my favorite island.
Okay.
I think it has every single climate around the world there. There's a desert, there's even snow on the mountaintop, there's a volcano, there's a place that looks like Mars. It's just amazing to go. You can drive through almost like you're driving through the entire world when you drive around the island. So yeah, it's my favorite island. Yeah.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for your participation and involvement in the Radical Innovation Summit.
Thank you.
Good luck to you and your colleagues this year on the Templeton Freedom Award.
Thank you.
And folks, thank you for joining us for this conversation. Again, encourage you to go to atlasnetwork.org, where you can learn about Joe and his colleagues at Grassroot Institute and the work that they're doing, particularly about the work that they've done and the others who have been nominated for this year's Templeton Freedom Award. And while you're at atlasnetwork.org, make sure to sign up for this year's Liberty Forum and Freedom Dinner in November, and I will see you there. And I will also be with you on another episode of Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio.